Get on the ground, trash. People like you don't get phone calls. I'm not resisting, the man said, flat and calm. You hear that kid Jason laughed at Tyler in the corner? Calm gets you nowhere in my block. He grabbed the cuffs and twisted one more notch. Metal bit into skin and cut off the blood flow to his fingers. Badge number, the man said quietly. What did you just say to me? Jason leaned in close, spit landing near his ear. I'd like it on record, the man repeated, steady, unbothered eyes locked on the blinking red light above them. He didn't know whose record he was about to be on. The man didn't blink.
Wrong move. She just physically assaulted the sole benefactor of her entire organization. Let me take you back.
The cell smelled wrong. It smelled old, chemical, defeated. The bleach hit first sharp and industrial, coating the back of the throat like something meant to erase evidence of human suffering. Beneath it, something worse. Sweat, fear. The accumulated residue of men who had sat on this exact concrete and lost. Jason moved like he owned the floor. He did own it. Every step landed heavy, deliberate, the thick soles of his combat boots striking the concrete with a rhythm that said, I decide. The leather of his tactical belt gleamed under the fluorescent light, stiff and polished and immaculate. The silver badge on his chest caught the light. It threw it back. It dared you to look directly at it. David did not look away. He stood near the bars, still composed, utterly quiet. The gray hoodie on his back was faded, washed too many times, soft in the places where fabric surrenders to age. The left cuff had a small tear near the hem. His sneakers were scuffed at the toe, the sole peeling slightly at the left heel. He had been jogging. He was 55 years old. He had no wallet, no phone, no identification of any kind on his body. To Jason, this was confirmation. To David, this was irrelevant. Get your face off the bars. Jason grabbed the back of David's neck. He shoved. Hard. The left side of David's face met the cold steel, and the impact sent a flat metallic ring through the air. In the corner, Tyler flinched. He was 19 years old, slight, pressed as far back against the peeling paint as his body would allow. His hands were shaking. David's hands were not shaking. The side of his face pressed against the bar. The steel was cold, unforgiving, exactly as cold as it looked. A thin line of blood opened above his cheekbone. It ran slowly, finding the path of least resistance down toward his jaw. It dripped. It hit the concrete floor with a sound no one else in the room registered. David registered it. People like you, Jason said close, now breath warm and sour against David's ear. Don't get phone calls. People like you don't have rights in here. You got nothing. You are nothing. He stepped back. He laughed. The laugh was loose, easy, entirely comfortable. He kicked David's left foot with the toe of his boot. Not hard enough to break anything. Hard enough to make the point. David straightened. Slowly. He turned his head, deliberate and measured, and looked at Jason with an expression that was difficult to read. Not rage, not fear, something colder than either, something that filed information away. His eyes moved just briefly to Jason's chest. The badge number was 4471. He memorized it. He moved on. You deaf. Jason stepped closer, again dropping his voice to something quiet and intimate and far more dangerous than a shout. I asked you a question, trash. What's your name? David said nothing. The silence seemed to irritate Jason more than any answer could have. He grabbed the hoodie by the collar, the worn cotton catching against the sharp brass edge of his collar pin, and shoved David back into the bars a second time. This time, the right side of David's face took the impact. The same flat metallic ring, the same deliberate cruelty. The blood from the first cut began to drip faster. Tyler made a small sound in the corner, a suppressed involuntary sound. The sound of someone trying very hard not to exist. Shut up, Jason said without looking at him. Your turn's coming, he turned back to David. He looked him up and down with an expression of complete, satisfied contempt. The faded hoodie, the torn cuff, the scuffed shoes, the blood now making its slow way down his chin. Jason read all of it as confirmation of something he had already decided before he ever opened the cell door. David let him read. He offered no correction. You don't have a lawyer. You don't have a name. You don't have a single person on this earth who knows where you are right now. Jason's voice was almost gentle now, smooth and certain. I run this block. I run these 12 hours, and when morning comes, you're going to wish you'd never laced up those sad little shoes and wandered into my neighborhood. David's gaze moved almost imperceptibly past Jason's left shoulder, up, to the far corner of the ceiling, to the small black housing unit mounted there, to the blinking red light inside it, small, steady present. The light blinked. David's expression did not change. Jason turned back to check something on his belt. He did not follow David's eye line. He did not look up. On the floor, Jason said. Now, both of you. Tyler went down immediately, knees hitting concrete, arms out, head down. Practiced, frightened, already knowing exactly how this went. David lowered himself slowly, deliberately, with the careful precision of a man managing old joints on a cold floor. His left knee touched first, then his right. He placed his hands cuffed behind him at the center of his back. He did not drop his gaze from the floor until he was fully down. Then he turned his head slightly to the left. The blinking red light was still visible from this angle, barely but visible. Jason's boot landed 2 inches from David's fingers. A warning, a reminder, a small act of dominance executed for its own pleasure. David did not flinch. He did not blink. He lay still on the cold concrete, blood drying on his cheek, and committed every single procedural violation to the exact location in his memory where he kept things he would use later. He was not thinking about tonight. He was thinking about morning. What Jason did not know, could not have known, did not think to ask, was that the man bleeding quietly on his cell floor had authored the very statutes Jason was violating, statute by statute, word by word. The booking area was smaller than it should have been. One metal desk scratched and dented along every edge, one plastic chair with a cracked seat, a single overhead bulb humming at the frequency of institutional indifference. The walls were the color of nothing in particular. They had been painted over so many times that the paint itself had become structural. Jason moved behind the desk with the ease of a man in his natural habitat. He pulled open the center drawer. He removed a standard intake form. He set it on the desk with the flat, dismissive precision of someone processing livestock. "Empty your pockets," he said without looking up. David stood on the other side of the desk, wrists still cuffed behind him, blood dried to a thin, dark line along his jaw. His hoodie had ridden up slightly during the walk down the corridor. The torn cuff at his left wrist had caught on something and widened. He looked in the flat fluorescent light like exactly what Jason had decided he was. "Can't empty my pockets," David said. His voice was even, quiet, and unhurried. "My hands are restrained behind my back." Jason looked up slowly. He smiled. "Right," he said. "My mistake." He came around the desk. He reached into David's front left pocket and removed a folded gym receipt blank on the back. He dropped it on the floor. He reached into the right pocket. His fingers found the key card. He pulled it out, held it up to the light, and examined it with theatrical curiosity. A standard gray plastic card, the logo of a gym on the front, a magnetic strip on the back, a name embossed in small letters across the lower right corner. Jason read the name. His expression did not change. It meant nothing to him. He walked to the waste bin at the corner of the desk and dropped the key card into it. It landed with a small, hollow plastic sound. Final, casual, deliberate. "Congratulations," Jason said, returning to his seat. "You're officially a nobody." No ID, no wallet, no phone, no emergency contact. He picked up the pen. He wrote John Doe in the name field. He wrote it slowly with the particular satisfaction of a man who enjoys paperwork when it lets him erase someone. "That's you now. John Doe. That's all you are until I decide otherwise." Tyler stood near the far wall slightly behind David, watching. He had been brought out of the cell for processing as well. His hands were cuffed in front of him, which was already a different category of treatment, though no one in the room acknowledged that. His eyes moved between Jason and David with the careful, contained attention of someone trying to read a situation that might still become more dangerous. Jason clicked the pen closed. He stood. He came around the desk again this time, moving toward David with a different quality of intention, slower, purposeful, performative. "On your knees," Jason said. David did not move immediately, not from resistance. From the deliberate, unhurried pace he had maintained since the moment of arrest. He lowered himself carefully, one knee at a time, onto the cracked linoleum. His cuffed hands pressed into the small of his back. His shoulders remained straight. Jason looked at Tyler. He smiled. The smile was not friendly. It was instructional. It was meant to demonstrate something, to establish clearly and visually the geometry of power in this room. "This is what happens," Jason said, addressing Tyler with the expansive confidence of a man delivering a lecture he had given before. "When you wander somewhere you don't belong, you end up on your knees in a booking room at midnight." He gestured at David. "Look at him. No name, no phone call, no one coming." He leaned against the desk edge, crossing his arms. "That's the system working exactly the way it's supposed to." Tyler said nothing. His jaw was tight. His eyes were wet. David, on his knees on the linoleum, turned his head slightly to the left. A small movement. Almost nothing. His eyes found the wall-mounted camera in the upper corner of the booking area. The same compact black housing unit. The same blinking red light. Steady, present recording. He looked directly into the lens. His lips moved. No sound came out. 2 words shaped carefully, deliberately, with the precision of a man who knew exactly what they meant and exactly who somewhere might be watching. Directive 41, B. He held the camera's gaze for exactly 2 seconds. Then he looked back at the floor. Jason had turned away. He was rifling through a desk drawer, looking for a secondary form. He did not see the silent message. He was not looking. He had already decided there was nothing in this room worth watching except himself. The cuffs clicked, 1 notch tighter. The steel band on David's left wrist closed down with a sharp, biting pressure that moved immediately past discomfort into something precise and targeted. The circulation, already reduced, narrowed further. David's fingers went from cool to cold. He did not make a sound. He did not shift his weight. He absorbed the sensation and filed it alongside everything else. Badge number 4471. Unlawful detention. Excessive force. Evidence destruction attempt. Now deliberate restriction of circulation. Conducted at approximately 11:47 p.m. in the 4th Precinct booking area in front of a civilian witness on camera. All of it retained, ordered ready. Jason dropped a second form onto the desk and began filling it out with the same slow, satisfied penmanship. The brass collar pins on his uniform caught the light. Sharp, pristine, gleaming at the edges where they met the soft, fraying collar of David's hoodie during the earlier shove. He was writing a story, Jason. His version. Neat official signed. He had no idea that a parallel version existed. Encrypted, time-stamped, already uploading, filed under a federal retention directive authored by the man currently bleeding on his linoleum floor. He thought he was erasing a nobody's dignity. He was in fact notarizing his own federal indictment. Every word he wrote, every box he checked, every deliberate cruelty he committed, with the easy confidence of absolute impunity, was adding one more page to a document he would one day be handed across a courtroom table. He did not know that yet. David did. The cell block went quiet after 2 a.m., not peaceful quiet, the other kind. The kind that had weight to it, that pressed down on the fluorescent light and made the humming louder. The kind of quiet that existed in places where things happened that were not supposed to be remembered. Jason sat at the precinct terminal. The desk was tucked into the monitoring alcove at the end of the holding corridor, half hidden behind a plexiglass partition that had yellowed with age. The screen threw blue-white light across his face. His expression was relaxed, unhurried, the expression of a man doing routine maintenance. He was not doing routine maintenance. He opened the local footage management interface. He navigated with the practiced ease of someone who had done this before or something close enough to it. 3 clicks to the archive folder, 2 more to filter by camera unit, 1 more to isolate the holding cell feed and the booking area feed. The timestamps populated in a column on the left side of the screen. 9 p.m. to present. 2 hours and 47 minutes of footage. He selected the last hour and 12 minutes. His right hand rested on the mouse. The gold-plated signet ring on his index finger caught the screen's glow heavy and warm-toned against the cold blue light. It clacked against the plastic housing of the mouse as he moved the cursor to the delete function. A small sound. Precise. Satisfied. He paused there, not from hesitation, from something closer to pleasure. The pause of a man savoring a moment before completing it. He clicked. The terminal asked for confirmation. He gave it. The mechanical beep of the system acknowledging the deletion moved through the dead-silent corridor like something dropped into still water. 1 flat sound, then silence again. The timestamp column on the left refreshed. The last hour and 12 minutes were gone. The record now showed a gap neat and institutional, as if the cameras had simply experienced a technical fault. Jason leaned back in his chair. He laced his fingers behind his head. He looked at the ceiling with the broad, uncomplicated satisfaction of a man who believed he had just solved a problem. Down the corridor, visible through the plexiglass, Tyler sat on the bench inside the cell. He had heard the beep. He did not know what it meant, but he understood its register, the sound of something being removed, something that had existed and now did not. "You hear that?" Jason called down the corridor, tilting his chair back, further voice carrying easily in the empty block. He wasn't speaking to Tyler specifically. He was speaking to the air, to the silence, to the general condition of his own authority. "That's the sound of your only problem disappearing." He let the chair come forward again. "No video, no case. My word against street trash. You know how that math works out." Tyler said nothing. He pressed his back against the wall of the cell and looked at the floor. David, sitting on the concrete at the far end of the cell, also said nothing. He had not moved significantly since being returned from the booking area. His wrists were still cuffed behind him. His left hand was still cold circulation, still reduced below the tighter cuff setting. He sat with his back against the wall, his knees drawn slightly up, his breathing slow and controlled. He had heard the beep. He recognized it. He knew exactly what it confirmed. He also knew something Jason did not. Across the city, in a building Jason had never entered and likely could not have named, Amanda Pierce sat in the dark of her internal affairs office. The overhead light was off. The desk lamp was angled toward the wall, throwing indirect low light across a surface covered in open files, printed logs, and a secondary monitor running passive intake feeds from departmental systems. She was not supposed to be watching the 4th precinct tonight. She was not scheduled to be in the office at all. She had come back at 11 p.m. for something unrelated, a filing deadline on a separate case, and she had stayed because the secondary monitor had flagged something unusual. The flag was small, automated. A single line of text in the intake queue, time-stamped 11:49 p.m. Directive 41B override initiated. Camera Unit 4, PC 7, and 4 PC 12. Federal cloud retention engaged. Upload in progress. She had stared at that line for a long moment. Directive 41B was not a common flag. It was not a flag she had ever seen trigger on its own without a manual input from someone inside the building who knew the code. It required specific knowledge. It required federal clearance. It required someone in that precinct at that moment to have deliberately activated it. She pulled up the originating camera units. She found the booking area feed time-stamped, encrypted, already transmitting to the federal cloud retention server. She found the holding cell feed alongside it, both running, both uploading, both already beyond the reach of any local deletion. She leaned forward. Her face was careful still and very focused. She opened a secure channel to the Federal Task Force Liaison Terminal and began typing. Back in the 4th precinct, Jason pushed back from the terminal and stood. He stretched unhurried, rolling his neck until it cracked. He walked back down the corridor toward the cell, hands loose at his sides, combat boots landing with the same heavy, rhythmic authority they always did. He stopped at the cell door. He looked through the bars at David. "You know what the funny thing is?" Jason said. He gripped the bars with both hands and leaned his weight into them, casual and dominant. "You could have just told me your name, could have made a phone call, could have been out of here in 20 minutes. He shook his head with the exaggerated regret of someone who felt none. "But you had to be difficult. So now there's no footage, no booking complaint, no record of anything except a John Doe detained on suspicion." He smiled. The smile was wide, comfortable, entirely certain of itself. "Morning comes, I cut you loose. You walk out. Nobody believes a word you say. That's how this ends." David looked at him. Steady, quiet, completely composed. The camera in the corner of the cell blinked. Once. Twice. Jason did not look up. David did not look away from Jason's face. He did not need to look at the camera. He already knew what the blinking meant. The upload initiated in the booking area was progressing. The footage Jason had just deleted from the local terminal was simultaneously, irrecoverably, and federally preserved on a server Jason had no access to, no knowledge of, and no jurisdiction over. The machine of injustice was working perfectly. It had simply swallowed the one man who designed the gears.
Wait, no way. He assaults a man and deletes the footage while laughing about it. If that were me, I would have lost my mind right there on the concrete. Imagine being locked in a cage, watching a corrupt cop erase your only proof of innocence. The audacity is real.
3 a.m. came without announcement. It arrived the way dread arrives, gradually then completely. The fluorescent light in the corridor had developed a flicker sometime after midnight, a stuttering irregularity that strobed across the cell floor every 4 or 5 seconds, and then stopped, and then started again. No one fixed it. No one came. David sat on the concrete. He had been sitting on the concrete for hours. The cold had moved through the thin fabric of the hoodie a long time ago and settled into the layer beneath the skin, into the joints, into the deep architecture of bone. His left knee ached. His right shoulder, where Jason had shoved him against the bars the second time, had stiffened into a slow, grinding soreness that worsened every time he shifted his weight. He shifted as little as possible. Across the cell, Tyler sat with his knees pulled to his chest and his arms wrapped around them. He had not slept. His eyes were open, fixed on the middle distance, on nothing in particular and everything at once. He was 19 years old. He had been in this cell for 6 hours. He had done nothing. He had been walking home from a study group 3 blocks from campus when a patrol car had pulled to the curb and 2 officers had stepped out with the particular energy of men who had already made a decision before they stopped the car. David looked at him, not quickly. Not with the scanning efficiency he had applied to every other element of this night. Slowly, with the full unguarded attention of a man allowing himself for a moment to actually see what was in front of him. Tyler was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical. It was the exhaustion of someone who had learned at 19 that the worst thing that could happen to him was being unremarkable, being ordinary, walking home on an ordinary night in an ordinary neighborhood and having that be enough. Being exactly what he was and where he was supposed to be, and having that be the thing that put him in a cage. David knew this exhaustion, not from tonight, from a longer history than tonight. He had built his career, his reputation, his entire professional architecture on the belief that the system could be made to work correctly, that the law rigorously applied, impartially enforced, carefully written, was a sufficient instrument of justice. He had authored oversight directives. He had presided over misconduct cases. He had handed down rulings that restructured departmental policy in 3 separate jurisdictions. He had believed with the disciplined conviction of a man who had seen real change that the machinery could be fixed from inside. And here he sat, on concrete, in the dark, bleeding, cuffed, disappeared into a John Doe intake form by a $27 an hour holding cell officer who had deleted the footage and gone home to sleep easy. The weight of it was specific. It was not abstract despair. It was the precise personal weight of a man who understood exactly how the mechanism worked, who had spent decades reinforcing its better functions, and who was sitting inside its worst one anyway. Title stripped, identity erased, reduced in the official record to no one. The system was not broken. That was the part that was hardest to hold. A broken system was fixable. What David was sitting inside was a system working exactly as designed in its darkest capacity, efficient, clean, leaving no marks except the ones on his face. He looked at Tyler again. The boy's eyes had closed, not sleep, just the temporary retreat of someone whose body had quietly overruled his vigilance. His breathing had evened out slightly. His chin had dropped a fraction toward his chest. David watched him breathe. He thought about what Tyler's morning would look like, what his next year would look like, what it would cost him to have spent a night in a holding cell on a record somewhere with a charge that might go nowhere and a story that might go everywhere except the places it needed to go. He thought about how many Tylers there were, tonight, in this city, in every city, sitting on concrete in flickering light, having done nothing, waiting for a morning that would not fully restore them. The concrete pressed into his joints, the cold pressed into the concrete, the silence pressed into everything. At 3:15 a.m., the camera in the upper corner of the cell blinked, not the standard single blink of active recording. 2 blinks, short, rapid, sequential. A behavioral pattern built into the federal cloud retention system to confirm successful archive completion. A status signal invisible to anyone who did not know what it meant. David knew what it meant. He did not move. He did not change his expression. He did not look at Jason's empty chair in the monitoring alcove or at the terminal where the local footage had been deleted with such easy confidence 2 hours earlier. He simply registered the signal the way he had registered the badge number, the booking violations, the deliberate cuff tightening all of it. Filed, retained, ready. The footage existed. Encrypted, time-stamped, federally preserved, untouchable. Everything Jason had done, every procedural violation, every act of deliberate cruelty performed on camera in a building that David himself had ensured was subject to federal retention law, was now sitting on a server. Jason could not reach in a jurisdiction. Jason did not govern, waiting with the particular patience of evidence that knows it will eventually be used. Hope was not the right word for what David felt at 3:15 a.m. on a concrete floor in the 4th Precinct holding block. Hope was too warm, too soft, too forward-facing for what this was. This was something older, quieter, the cold, precise recognition of a man who had spent 30 years learning how systems moved, where they were weak, where they held, and how to wait. Morning was 6 hours and 45 minutes away. David closed his eyes. He did not sleep. He conserved. Somewhere across the city in a dark office, a cursor blinked on a secure federal terminal. Fingers moved across a keyboard. A file opened. A name not John Doe appeared at the top of the intake log. The hunted come morning would be the judge. The federal marshals arrived at 6:40 a.m. They did not knock. They did not announce themselves at the front desk with the patient deferential energy of visitors. They presented credentials, spoke 4 sentences to the desk sergeant, and walked directly to the holding block with the focused, unhurried momentum of people who already knew the layout. Jason was not on shift. The overnight had ended at 6. He had signed out, driven home, showered, changed into his dress uniform for the misconduct hearing scheduled at 10 a.m. A routine matter, a prior complaint from a civilian filed months ago, already once postponed. He expected a local magistrate. He expected the usual procedural choreography. He expected to be back at the precinct by noon. The marshals processed David's release in 11 minutes. They removed the cuffs. They returned his gym receipt retrieved from the floor of the booking area where Jason had dropped it. The keycard was gone. The waste bin had been emptied on the overnight cleaning rotation. One item lost, everything else intact. A marshal handed David a clean towel and indicated a washroom at the end of the corridor. David went. He stood at the sink and ran cold water over his wrists. The left one had a deep, continuous red mark where the cuff had been tightened. He pressed the towel gently against the dried blood on his cheek. The cut was shallow. It had closed on its own sometime before dawn. It had left a dark, clean bruise spreading from the cheekbone toward the temple, purpled at the center and yellowing at the edges. Visible. Unmistakable. His. He looked at himself in the metal mirror above the sink. The reflection was imprecise, slightly distorted, as institutional mirrors always were. The hoodie was wrinkled and stiff with dried sweat. The sneakers were still scuffed. The bruise was still there. He looked in the warped metal reflection like a man who had spent the night on a concrete floor. Because he had. He dried his hands. He folded the towel. He set it on the edge of the sink and walked out. A marshal drove him to the federal courthouse. They did not speak during the drive. David looked out the window at the city moving through its early morning routines. Traffic thickening, coffee shops opening, people walking to work with the brisk, forward-leaning purpose of people who had slept in beds and were not thinking about holding cells. He watched all of it, with the particular quality of attention that belongs to someone returning from somewhere the people outside the car cannot imagine. They arrived at the courthouse at 7:20 a.m. David went directly to his chambers. His clerk, a composed and perceptive woman named Elaine, who had worked with him for 11 years, looked up from her desk as he came through the door. Her eyes moved to the bruise. Her expression shifted, fractionally controlled and professional, but present. "The 10 o'clock hearing," David said. "Is the docket confirmed?" "Confirmed," Elaine said. "Officer Jason Riley, badge 4471. Prior civilian misconduct complaint continued from March." She paused. "Sir, I know," David said. "Please have my robe pressed and ready by 9:45. He went into the inner office and closed the door. He sat at his desk for a long moment. The chair was leather-worn to the precise shape of his posture over years of use. The desk was mahogany solid and old and serious. The bookshelves behind him held 30 years of federal case law organized by year and jurisdiction. Every volume he had ever referenced annotated in his own hand in the margins. The room smelled of paper and wood polish and the accumulated weight of deliberate patient work. He sat in it and felt for the first time since 9 p.m. the previous evening the full dimensions of where he was. Who he was. Not because the title restored something that had been taken. The title had always been beside the point. But because the room represented something real. The long, unglamorous work of building a system that could, when functioning correctly, hold a man like Jason Riley accountable in a forum he could not charm, intimidate, or delete his way out of. He opened the top drawer of his desk. He removed a legal pad. He wrote 6 lines in his precise, unornamented handwriting. Then he put the pen down and sat quietly until 9:45. At 9:50 a.m., David emerged from chambers in his robe. The fabric was heavy black silk, structured at the shoulders, falling in full, clean lines to the floor. It moved differently than the hoodie. Everything about it moved differently. He walked down the interior corridor toward the courtroom, nodding once to the bailiff stationed at the door. Inside the courtroom was filling. The gallery held a modest crowd, lawyers cycling between cases, a court reporter settling at her station, 2 junior clerks organizing documents at the evidence table. And in the first row of the gallery, Tyler Brooks, 19 years old, still wearing the same clothes from the night before, sitting with his hands folded in his lap and his eyes on the front of the room. David did not look at him as he entered. Not yet. Jason was already at the respondent's table. Dress uniform immaculate. Brass collar pins catching the light. The silver badge centered perfectly on his chest, gleaming with the same absolute authority it had gleamed with the night before in the holding cell. He was leaning slightly back in his chair, relaxed, one hand resting on the table, the posture of a man who had done this before and understood how it ended. "All rise," the bailiff said. The room stood. David walked through the side door and ascended the bench. He set his legal pad to the left of the center position. He arranged his pen parallel to it. He looked up. Across the courtroom, Jason's eyes found his face. They moved involuntarily to the bruise on his temple, the dark, yellowed, unmistakable bruise, the one Jason had put there at approximately 9:47 p.m. the previous evening against the bars of holding cell 4. The smirk did not fade gradually. It collapsed, all at once. The blood left Jason's face in a single visible withdrawal, and what replaced it was something raw and unprocessed and entirely new to his expression. David looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. Then he picked up the gavel and brought it down. David did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The courtroom had its own acoustics designed over a century ago by people who understood that authority properly constructed did not require volume. Every word from the bench landed with the clean, unambiguous precision of something dropped from a great height onto a hard surface. "Be seated," he said. The room sat. He opened the legal pad to the first page. He looked at it briefly, then set it aside. He did not need it. He had written those 6 lines at 9 a.m. as a structural reminder, an outline, a skeleton. The substance was already organized in the place where he had been organizing it since approximately 9:47 p.m. the previous evening. This proceeding concerns a prior civilian misconduct complaint filed against Officer Jason Riley, badge 4471 of the 4th Precinct. David's voice was measured, deliberate, completely controlled. "Before we address that complaint, this court has additional matters to enter into the record." Jason's attorney, a compact man named Farrow, who handled departmental defense cases with the practiced efficiency of someone who had won most of them, leaned toward his client and said something quietly. Jason did not respond. He was looking at the bruise on David's temple. He could not stop looking at it. David lifted the single sheet at the top of the legal pad. He began to read. He read Jason's fabricated police report aloud. Not selectively, in full. Every line, every checked box, every carefully constructed official sentence describing the detention of one John Doe on suspicion of loitering and failure to identify. He read it in the flat, precise tone of a man reading a document he finds technically interesting and morally contemptible in equal measure. He did not editorialize. He did not pause for effect. He simply read it, letting the language do what fabricated language does when read aloud in a federal courtroom by the person it was designed to erase. It took 4 minutes. When he finished, he set the report down. He looked at Jason directly. "Officer Riley," he said, "this report describes a routine detention. It describes a cooperative subject, a standard intake process, and an uneventful night in the holding block." He paused. 1 beat. "It does not mention the 2 occasions on which the subject's face was forced against the cell bars. It does not mention the deliberate tightening of restraints beyond standard procedure. It does not mention the disposal of the subject's personal property into a waste receptacle, and it does not mention the deletion at approximately 2:14 a.m. of 1 hour and 12 minutes of precinct surveillance footage from the local terminal." The courtroom was very still. Farrow was on his feet. "Your Honor, the respondent must object to the characterization." "Sit down, Mr. Farrow." David did not look at him. "You will have your opportunity." Farrow sat. Jason's hands were flat on the table in front of him. Both of them. Pressed down fingers spread as if the table were the only stable surface available. His face had moved past pale into something that had no good color name. Ash. Gray. The color of a man whose internal systems were recalculating in real time and finding nothing useful. "There is no proof," Jason said. His voice came out at the wrong register, too high, slightly fractured at the edges. He caught it. He steadied it. He tried again. "The footage doesn't exist." "There is no footage." David looked at him. The expression on David's face was not satisfaction. It was not anger. It was something more precise than either. the expression of a craftsman observing the exact moment a mechanism functions as designed. "You're correct," David said, "that the local footage no longer exists on the 4th Precinct terminal." He paused, 2 beats this time. It was deleted at 2:14 a.m. from the local archive. He let that sit for exactly 1 second. However, the side door of the courtroom opened. Amanda Pierce walked in. She was wearing a dark blazer, no jewelry, her credentials on a lanyard against her chest. She carried a federal evidence case in both hands, black with silver hardware, the kind that required a biometric key to open. She set it on the evidence table with a sound that was not loud, but was in the particular silence of that courtroom at that moment absolute. She opened it. She removed a hard drive encased in protective metallic housing, dense and solid and unremarkable in appearance, and set it on the table facing the bench. "For the record," David said, "this is Special Investigator Amanda Pierce, Federal Task Force Liaison, Internal Affairs Division. Investigator Pierce, please describe the item you have placed into evidence." Amanda's voice was clear and unhurried. "Federal Cloud Retention Archive, Camera Units 4PC7 and 4PC12, 4th Precinct, time-stamped from 9:03 p.m. to 2:41 a.m. Recovered intact from the Federal Secure Server under Directive 41B Retention Protocol. Chain of custody is documented and unbroken." Jason's attorney was standing again. "Your Honor, the defense has had no opportunity to review. The footage was generated by equipment in a federally monitored facility," David said, still not looking at Farrow. "Its retention was automatic. Its authenticity is a matter of federal record." He picked up his pen. He set it down. He looked at Jason one more time. Directive 41B, Officer Riley mandates automatic encrypted off-site backup for all surveillance equipment in facilities subject to federal oversight. It was enacted in 2019. He paused. "I authored it." The monitors at the front of the courtroom activated. The footage began. The holding cell, 9:47 p.m. The fluorescent light, the concrete floor, the bars. David in the gray hoodie, wrists, cuffed face pressed against the steel. Jason's combat boots, heavy and polished, moving with complete confidence across the frame. The sound of impact, the sound of laughter. All of it clean and time-stamped and federally preserved, playing at full volume in a silent courtroom. Jason watched himself on the monitor. He watched himself with the specific total horror of a man seeing something he believed was gone forever, something he had personally deleted, something he had constructed an entire future around, having successfully erased, playing in high definition on a screen the size of a courtroom wall. The blood left his face. It did not return. In the gallery, Tyler Brooks pressed both hands over his mouth. His shoulders shook. His eyes did not leave the screen. David waited until the relevant segment concluded. He reached forward. He picked up the gavel. The evidence, it turned out, was never gone. It had simply been waiting on the judge's desk. David set the gavel down after the single strike. He did not pick it up again. He did not need to. The sound had done what it was designed to do, which was mark a threshold, a clean line between what existed before it and what would exist after. Everything after that strike belonged to a different category of time. He looked at Jason. Jason was still at the respondent's table. He had not moved in 4 minutes. His hands were still flat on the surface in front of him, still pressed down, still spread. The dress uniform was immaculate. The brass collar pins still caught the light. The silver badge still gleamed with the precision of something maintained, obsessively polished to the point of performance. All of it was still technically correct, still visually authoritative, still assembling the appearance of a man who held power. The appearance was the only thing left. "Officer Jason Riley," David said. His voice had not changed in register or pace since the proceeding began. It remained what it had been measured, deliberate, fully controlled. The voice of a man who understood that what he was doing did not require decoration. "This court finds sufficient cause to act on the following." He looked at the legal pad. He did not read from it. He had not needed it since 9 a.m. He looked at it for 1 second and then looked back at Jason, using the pause the way a craftsman uses a tool precisely for a specific purpose without excess. 1. The conduct documented in Federal Evidence Exhibit A constitutes deprivation of civil rights under color of law in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 242(2). The deletion of surveillance footage at 2:14 a.m. constitutes evidence tampering in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 1519. 3. The deliberate falsification of the intake report filed under your badge number constitutes obstruction of justice. He set the legal pad down. Federal charges on all 3 counts will be referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office for prosecution. Farrow was standing. He had been standing for 30 seconds, hand raised, mouth open. David looked at him now. Mr. Farrow, your client's departmental rights and appeal procedures remain intact and will be respected in full through the appropriate channels. This court is not convicting. This court is referring and acting within its immediate authority. He paused. Sit down. Farrow sat. His expression was the expression of a man recalculating a case he had walked in expecting to win in under an hour. David looked back at Jason. Effective immediately pending the outcome of federal prosecution, you are suspended without pay and relieved of all police powers. Your badge and departmental credentials are surrendered to this court. He nodded to the bailiff. The bailiff walked to the respondent's table. He stood beside Jason and waited. Jason did not move for a long moment. He looked at the badge on his chest with an expression that was difficult to categorize. Not grief exactly, not rage, something more disoriented than either. The expression of a man who had organized the entire architecture of his identity around a single object and was being asked in a federal courtroom in front of witnesses to remove it. He unclipped it. He set it on the table. The sound it made against the wood was small, flat, entirely ordinary. A piece of metal meeting a surface, nothing more. The bailiff picked it up. He walked it to the bench and set it on the corner. David did not look at it. Federal marshals, David said. 2 marshals entered from the side door. They moved to the respondent's table with the same focused, unhurried momentum that had characterized every federal action in the past 18 hours. They were not hurrying because they did not need to hurry. The outcome was already determined. The mechanism had completed its function. 1 marshal produced a set of handcuffs. Standard issue. Cold, heavy steel. He placed them on Jason's wrists with a practiced efficiency. No theater, no additional pressure, no performative tightening. Just the cuffs properly applied at the standard setting. The click of the closure was quiet and definitive. Jason looked down at his own wrists. He looked at the steel against his skin. Something moved across his face, something that arrived too late to be useful and too real to be suppressed. He understood what he was looking at, not just the restraint, the mirror of it. The precise structural echo of what he had done in a holding cell the night before to a man he had decided was nobody. He had tightened those cuffs deliberately, 1 additional notch, for no reason except that he could. These were applied correctly. That difference meant something. David had made sure it would. The marshals moved Jason toward the side exit. His boots, still polished, still heavy, still striking the floor with their characteristic authority, made the same sound they had always made. But the room they were moving through had changed. The sound landed differently now. It landed like an echo of something that no longer applied. In the gallery, Tyler Brooks stood up. He had not planned to stand. His body made the decision before his mind caught up with it. He rose to his feet in the second row of the gallery, 19 years old, still wearing the clothes from the night before, and watched Jason Riley move toward the door in federal handcuffs. His eyes were wet. They had been wet since the footage began playing on the courtroom monitors. They were wet now for a different reason, or the same reason shifted into a different register. Not just relief, something larger and harder to name. The specific, exhausting release of watching something true be confirmed in a place designed to confirm true things. He pressed both hands over his mouth again. His shoulders shook once. Then he straightened. He lowered his hands. He stood up very straight. David from the bench saw him. He did not look away. For exactly 3 seconds, the chief federal district judge and the 19-year-old college student held each other's gaze across a courtroom that had for one night and one morning contained both of them in very different circumstances. David gave one small, deliberate nod. Tyler nodded back. The side door closed behind Jason. The sound of it was final, clean, and absolute. The silver badge sat on the corner of the bench, gleaming under the courtroom lights, performing its authority for an audience that was no longer obligated to receive it. Amanda Pierce closed the federal evidence case. She clicked the latches. She picked it up, nodded once to the bench, and walked out. David looked at the courtroom. He looked at the gallery, the clerks, the court reporter, the lawyers, cycling back to their own cases, the ordinary machinery of a federal court returning to its standard operations after an extraordinary morning. He picked up the gavel. He held it for a moment. He had not seen the robe. David brought the gavel down. One strike, clean and final. This court is adjourned. He had communicated it in the only language available to him at the time, through stillness, through memory, through the precise and patient activation of every tool the system had given him over 30 years of building it. Jason had looked at a man in a faded hoodie and scuffed sneakers bleeding on his cell floor and seen nobody. He had seen the end of the problem. He had seen a gap in the official record where a man used to be.
Fiction. But that feeling, your dignity being stripped away by someone abusing their power, only to watch them dig their own grave. Have you ever faced someone who thought their badge or title made them untouchable? Drop a comment below. Like, share, subscribe. Simple.